As
Right.
anyone knows out there who's been through this, you can send something to a bank 12 times and they don't get it. And adds to the frustration of the consumer. They feel like they're doing everything that's said. That follow-up is crucial. So we submit the application, and once it is deemed complete by the servicer or the lending institution, the investors, they will pause foreclosure proceedings while it is under review. It's sort of a reverse underwriting situation. So instead of when you buy a house, you go to underwriting, when you're trying to modify or remedy a past due loan situation, it effectively goes to underwriting again. You send them your financials. They all tell you it's a 30-day review period, and that's pretty accurate. Sometime in 3 to 4 weeks, they will issue what's called a results letter.
The Exit Strategies radio show welcomes back its listeners. Host Corwyn J. Melette introduces the crucial second part of the conversation with their guest, Mike Russell, founder of Hope for Hardship. Last week, Mike shared his powerful story of survival and taught the audience about the life-saving FHA partial claim mortgage. This week, the focus shifts from strategy to the actual foreclosure law and process. If listeners are facing financial challenges, this episode equips them with the legal knowledge and timelines necessary to fight back. Mike breaks down the complex foreclosure process, from the bank's right to cure letter to the moment an auction is scheduled, and discusses why common solutions like Chapter 13 bankruptcy can sometimes prove to be the biggest mistake.
So there's a process to foreclosure, and most people don't understand it, right?
Sure.
There's laws. Each state respectively has their own. Some states are lien theory, some states are deed theory. So there's different things to kind of work in all of that. But if you could, Mike, kind of talk us through what that process looks like and essentially those triggers, if you will, where the consumer needs to do something.
Sure. So every bank, every loan written in America, traditional loan from a traditional lending institution, gives the consumer something called a right to cure. Upon notification that you are in default of the terms, they give you a period of time, typically I see 90 days, where the consumer has a right to cure the debt, and the bank cannot move forward with a foreclosure proceeding until that date has passed. Banks are outstanding at watching timelines. They are absolutely fantastic. That may be the only thing they're fantastic at, okay? They don't miss the fine print. You know, it's us. We miss the fine print. They don't. And so once you're deemed in default, which typically happens at about 46 days past due, and that is because most banks have a 15-day grace period. And so if your payment was due on June 1st and you didn't pay by July 16th, the bank is going to kind of declare they're in default. They are one payment behind. Now, will the bank issue a right to cure letter right then? No, but you'll usually see it at 70 days. About 70 days without a payment, they will initiate right to cure rights, which tacks on another 90 days before they then have the right here in the state of Massachusetts to hire a foreclosure attorney to record something called a notice of intent to foreclose. And it is depending on who you are, I call it the Soldier and Sailors Act. It's really called the Service Members Act of 2001, maybe, or something. I don't know. And what that is, the one protected class in America when it comes to this stuff are active duty service members. Active duty service members get a reprieve of sorts. And so they serve this notice, and they serve it very quickly. So figure about 150 days since you last made a payment, because they got to give you that 90-day right to cure. You do nothing. You don't do anything to cure it satisfactory to the bank. They're going to issue that notice of intent to foreclose, and that's going to have on it a court date. And it's about halfway down the page, and it says, if you are in the active military, please come forth to this court by this date, and we will stop the proceeding. I got to tell you, every single person I've ever worked with says, I got a letter. It says I have to go to court. And I said, it doesn't say you have to go to court. Are you in the active military? And everyone thinks that's a court date that they have to. It's just a human. We don't actually read it. We just see that, wow, you know what I'm saying? And so once that date passes and no one shows up to say that, prove that they were in the active military, then all bets are off. And I've seen banks schedule an auction within a month of that date passing. I've seen banks schedule a foreclosure auction maybe 60 days because they have some title cleanup work. They have to do some assignments, get some affidavits, go back and clear title, make sure there's no missing discharges or assignments or affidavits on title. Banks like to clean up title before they potentially take title to real property. And so that is often why things get delayed a little longer. But what I just described is 200 days. And so it creates an unreasonable sense of security in the consumer. You know, I haven't paid my mortgage in 9 months. Nothing's happened yet. And look, the public phone calls, the door knocks, the letters, that doesn't start until this becomes public record. And it becomes public record upon the filing of the notice of intent to foreclose. Then it's public record. At that moment is when everybody comes out of the wood. And I don't disparage anybody's business model, man. It is what it is. People make a living doing whatever they want. But from where I'm standing in the work that I'm doing, the vast majority of the people who are banging on the doors and calling these homeowners and doing this stuff are seeking to capitalize on the perceived misfortune of others. They are either buy that property cheap, get them to send a $5,000 retainer we got a guy here in Massachusetts who likes to tell people that he'll sue their bank. The same form letter that goes out and it says, I was reviewing your mortgage documents and I think there's something wrong. The bank did something wrong. If you pay me $5,000, I'll sue your bank for you. And I can't see people actually do it. I'm unaware of a successful suit, and I've yet to meet an attorney who will do that on a contingency fee basis. And so they look, everyone comes out of the woodwork because they see an opportunity to either buy a property cheap, get those people to sell their property, or file bankruptcy, or sue the bank. And so they are being barraged by people who may sound pretty good, may look pretty good, may have a story that sounds like it's something, and those people are in sales mode, right? And the reality is, I don't judge it. I get it. It's capitalist society. That's what people do. But the reality is, I believe that it is worth exhausting every possible measure available to you to retain your property in a market like this with a low interest rate and rent so high before you make any decision about whether or not you should sell your home. And personally, as you can imagine, being through bankruptcy, I'm not a big proponent of it. I filed bankruptcy prematurely. I saw path of least resistance is what I saw in a bankruptcy. You didn't have to tell me much. All you had to tell me is I don't owe it. Where do I sign, man? Like, can I digital sign? Like, let's do it. And look, a lot of people are like that because they're uneducated. And my biggest concern about bankruptcy with folks is what people fail to recognize. When you file Chapter 13 for the sole purpose of putting a stay on an auction on your property, and let's be real, that's why people file Chapter 13 when they're facing foreclosure. It's to put a stay. And what they fail to recognize is just how temporary that stay is. Because once you get with your attorney and you put forth your bankruptcy case, your filing, which is effectively a story of your finances and your debt, and you go on the mercy of the U.S. trustee at the bankruptcy court and you say, here's my story, please help me. 6 times out of 10, the bankruptcy court kicks that case back and says, we're not going to approve your case. You can't afford to both pay your mortgage payment and pay us for 3 to 5 years on the crammed down value of this pile of debt if you sell your house. And so often people end up in a place where they file bankruptcy to get a stay. They don't follow through because they got the case kicked back. They lose contact with the attorney. And there are so many bankruptcy attorneys, and they're all fantastic right up until the check clears. I mean, ish, right? And then they can't get them on the phone. And then, I don't know. There's a missing piece of paper. I hear these stories all the time. And they end up getting foreclosed on anyway. And so now they have a bankruptcy public record on their credit report, and they eventually get foreclosed on anyway. It's a horrible thing.
Let's take a short break.
You found the perfect property. You got the vision. Now you need the capital. At Melefund Capital, we specialize in funding real estate deals for investors who want to build, flip, or hold and don't have the time to chase after banks. Whether it's new construction, a fix and flip, or long-term rental, we offer simple terms, fast approvals, and access to private capital. We even work with manufactured housing projects because we know what it takes to build value from the ground up. Simple. You bring the deal, we bring the money. Visit mellifundcapital.com or call 843-619-7038 to get pre-qualified today. Mellifund Capital, we fund what you build. I see along that vein, along that same storyline, I've heard it, witnessed it a number of times where people, because of that, will pull the house out of the bankruptcy. So they file bankruptcy on everything else, but pull the house from it. So now you got to try to figure out, if you will, this whole workaround or workout. And now it's a challenge or an issue because now you filed a bankruptcy, your credit's tanked, so you can't do anything to reposition, re-leverage, or do anything. So now you're trying to figure out a workout with the bank, and you filed a bankruptcy. They already have a tendency to believe that you have the propensity to fail on. So it's more difficult to get a workout once you've done that at times. So yes, is that what you've seen?
1,000%. Absolutely. And what it leads to oftentimes is renting a place you really don't want to live in. And that's certainly where I ended up. My landing was not soft by any stretch of the imagination. My landing was hard and abrupt. And I ended up living in a place that I did not want to live. I didn't think I deserved to live there. And that was one of the hardest things I ever went through. Having that foreclosure and that bankruptcy on my public record, by the time I was able to be a viable bet in traditional lending and buy a house again, that may have been the happiest day in my life.
So Mike, obviously anything cannot go the way that you want it to go, right? But when it works, it works. So if you don't mind, share a story of someone, hardship. Please edit out whatever content you need to edit out. But, when it works, when you have the hardship and you have the right story, the right mindset, the right pieces of the puzzle, if you will, so that your portrait looks a lot different than what it could have looked. Share one of those for our listeners, if you don't mind.
Sure, man. Listen, one of the first people that I helped became one of my best friends. And when I first met him, he didn't trust me as far as he could throw me. And I was sitting in the living room of this house. talking to him and his wife and his two children. And they trusted me and they wanted to move forward with what I was proposing to them. But he didn't. And he was in such a place. There was some substance abuse at play, which is a very commonality, a thread amongst a lot of this. And he couldn't see where he was living and what it was doing to his family. He simply couldn't see the forest through the trees. He couldn't see that there was a better life on the other side of this. That is a tremendously common bond among folks, is oftentimes you're in a housing situation, the house was falling apart, and you're so committed to it, and it's been your life for so long that you can't even see how much simpler and better life could be somewhere else starting over. It took me a long time to get him to a place to do that. But we weren't able to save that property. He was too far behind, and we couldn't prove that his hardship was over. And they were underwater. They were underwater in that home. They owed more than the property was worth. And so both of their credits were in the 500s. One of them might have been high 4s. And so we ended up short selling that property so they would avoid a foreclosure event on their credit. We pulled that off at the skin of our teeth. He really didn't want to do it, but we did. And my wife and I just kept kind of looking for rentals for a place for he and his family to land. And we found one in the same city in a much nicer neighborhood. And the way that we were able to get them to get into that property is we proposed to the landlord a 3-year lease, and they agreed to it. And that's why we won the lease. And about 2.5 years later, once their credit had restored, we were talking and I approached the landlord and I said, hey, these tenants want to buy your home. And the wife had a 401k that he didn't even know about, thank God. And she was able to take some money out of that 401k for a 10% down payment. And they bought that property and they still live there today. And they couldn't be happier these years later. Life is so much improved. The house is so much, they became homeowners again. And I did every stitch of that without ever charging them a single penny. It was my honor to do it. And every time I go over there, he thanks me for helping him. So yeah, man, there are stories like that. And people struggle to see the other side. And there's the greatest inalienable truth is struggle's just a chapter unless you make it permanent.
I like that.
That's the reality of it. And so it's just a chapter. And he wasn't able to see it. He didn't have the foresight to see that there was a better life on the other side. But boy, and look, you know what? I have a ton of those stories. Not everybody becomes my best friend, but there isn't a single person that we've helped that would walk by the street and not say hello.
I was just thinking the same thing. At least they probably, but they may not be your best friend, but I'm pretty sure they still talk to you. So Mike, this journey for you, is bigger than and it's been a while since I've kind of shared or put this out there, but I always talk about the things being bigger than us. At least I used to say that a lot, that things that we do, the things that we're successful at, the place where we have impact in people's lives, it's not us. It is God working through us in order to be of service and help others. You took what some would deem to be a tragedy and you turned it into triumph, but not for you, but for others. So kudos on that. But this has become a mission and a life calling for you at this point. Is that correct?
No question about it, man. This is what gets me up in the morning. I was a different guy, man. If we knew each other 20 years ago, look, I was chasing that top line number, that ego number, right?
Yeah.
That's all that mattered to me. That's all that mattered in my whole life. I chased money more than I chased anything in my whole life, and it's all that really mattered. And it's funny, when I stopped chasing money, great things happened. You know what else happened? I stopped worrying about money. I stopped worrying about money, and I worry more about other people and how I can just interject myself in their lifeline and be like a positive trajectory point. From the moment we met and from the moment you started listening to a little bit of my guidance, the trajectory of your life began to improve. That's a tremendously rewarding thing. And I cannot say with any honesty, that's always who I was.
That's fair. And that's true. That's the thing. So Mike, look, I want to make sure, let's take this an opportunity to get your contact information out there for our listeners, for them to be able to reach out, to get in contact with you. So where can our folks reach you at?
Good, man. Listen, anybody out there can call me directly anytime, 508-501-5800. You can call me direct, man. That's my cell. And I don't care where you are in this country. I'm helping somebody right now in California that was a fire victim. That is ugly. And listen, I'm just an ear, and I got a whole bunch of 30 years of useless real estate and banking knowledge rattling around in my brain. So I'm a resource, and you can go learn my story and what we do at hardship.org anytime.
So Mike, thank you for that. That dude said he got 30 years of knowledge, just rattling around. I ain't doing that. He just, maybe we can do something with it. Just call me. We'll see. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
I love it. So for our listeners, guys, please go visit the website. Again, hardship.org. Mike, I've been playing around on the website as we've been on the show, and it's definitely chock full of resources and opportunities for people to have a greater understanding of the situation they may be facing, or get more insight into what may be going on, if you will, around them. So definitely. So Mike, I want to ask you this. I mean, I'll kind of frame it as that's the mic drop question at hindsight, because you went through a lot of things that some people probably wouldn't have ever recovered from. But short version is, but one of the things that you were saying earlier, and I want to interject this, out of all the things that you've been through, you still yet live. Sometimes people think that going through a financial hardship such as bankruptcy, foreclosure, or the like is quote unquote end of their existence, like the day's over, is done. That's not the case, because you're here with us today as living proof. That's not the case. But if you were to be able to, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently way back yonder when that, and not saying that you should have, because I really believe that what you're doing is your calling, but what would you have done different back then that would have completely changed your trajectory?
Well, geez, man, my story's not unique, but like what I would have never done is pick up a drink or a drug. That's the first thing I never would have done. But no, I wouldn't have been so selfish. Okay. If I could have just been less self-seeking, things would have gone much differently for me. And I'm just grateful, by the grace of God, they're going different for me now.
That's huge. That's huge. Thank you for sharing that. So, Mike, look, we've had an amazing show, man. I thank you for sharing the story. We definitely got to break this up into 2 parts, because you have you got that story, but you also have that willingness to share it. Sometimes people go through things and they just bottle it up. They just keep it inside. They don't do anything with it. They don't share the experience with others so they could trustfully avoid or either improve their situation. So thank you so much for being willing to be raw and put it all on the line. So thank you so much for that.
Absolutely, man. It's been an honor. And listen, for you and your listeners, I'm going to say a prayer that you get a good football team down in the Carolinas. Maybe that from my lips to God's ears, you know what I mean? It's being up entitled down here in Boston, you know what I mean? I feel like we've got too many, you know what I mean? Like, I can send one down, you know what I mean? Like, we can send one down.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So, Mike, look, again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, man, being part of Exit Strategies Radio Show family.
You as well, man. Yeah, anytime you ever want to do something again, let me know.
Will do. So for our listeners, guys, look, y'all know how I feel. You know what I say. You know, I always put the 2 of those things together, and I give it to you this way, which is to tell you that I love you. I love you. And we're going to see you guys out